In the last section, we made our first action creator and we bound it to the book list container. In this section, we're going to verify that we can actually call that action creator, and then we're going to add an actual action to it, an action with a type, to make sure that we, rather than just console log, which we're doing right now, we're going to make sure that we return an action that's actually usable by our different reducers. Okay, so we're going to go back over to book list here. Now, whenever a user clicks on the line item for a particular book, we can call our action creator. In the last section, when we connected the action creator to the component, to the container, we made it available as a prop, specifically this.props.selectBook. If we add a click event handler on our LI here, we can then call the action creator as simply, this.props.selectBook. And remember, we want to call the action creator with the particular book that was clicked on. So we're going to go ahead and add our click event handler to the LI right here. We're going to do a little bit of spacing just to make it more clear what we're doing, like so. And then we'll go ahead and add our click event handler. So we'll say on click, and then we'll pass it a function, and we're going to use a arrow function here. All right, so as I mentioned before, we know we want to call this.props.selectBook, right? This part is hopefully, take it on faith, a little bit, or I shouldn't say obvious, not obvious at all, but we covered why select book is available on props, right? The key though is, what are we going to pass here? What's the argument? Well, it's really simple. We're just going to pass in the book right here. We're already using the book, right? We know everything about the book inside of this function that we passed to map. We've got the book and we're referencing its title here already. So we'll just go ahead and say, whenever this thing is clicked, call this.props.selectBook and pass it the book. All right, let's save this and give it a shot in the browser. So I'm going to refresh the page and pop open the console and then click on a line item here. All right, you'll notice that we got this error here, don't sweat it, but above it, a book has been selected, JavaScript the good parts, Harry Potter, Dark Tower, Eloquent Ruby. All right, awesome. So what this means is that we successfully connected our action creator to the container. And we're successfully calling the action creator, which right now is just doing our console log for us. I'm going to pull the diagram of our Redux cycle back up real quick. Okay, here we go. So basically step one is done. When a user clicks on a book, we're calling the action creator. Step two is to make sure that our action creator returns a usable action that can flow through all their different reducers. So our action always has more or less the same type of signature. It's a JavaScript object with a type property that describes the type of action, and it also contains some information that further describes that event. All right, I'm going to close this down a little bit. All right. So we want to basically enhance our action creator right here so it returns a usable action. We'll take out the console log because we don't really need it anymore. We know that this thing is at least getting called. And instead, we're going to return an object. So this object right here is going to be our actual action. So let's add select book is an action creator. It needs to return an action, an object with a type property. Cool. So again, actions usually have two values, a type and a payload. The payload further describes or clarifies the conditions of the action that's being triggered. Every action must have a type that describes the purpose of the action. So let's think about the action here for a second. The action described is a user selecting the book, and that's why we gave it the action type book selected. So let's say type book selected. You'll notice that right now you might have seen a couple different tutorials where the type here is not a string, but it's actually a variable, a constant. We will do that in the next section, totally. For right now, we're just going to keep it simple, and we're just going to use a string here. Okay, so we know the type. We now need to provide the payload, basically, a piece of data that describes the action that's being undertaken. So we'll say payload is the actual book. Okay, so this is looking pretty good here. To review, an action always contains a type and sometimes contains a payload. The type is always an uppercase, usually a string, or always separated by keywords if it's multiple words. Because it's so important to keep the exact spelling of this type consistent, we usually pull all the types out to a separate file. But again, we're just going to use a single string here because we're only going to have one action in this app. And the next one will do things the 100% right way. But again, this is very close to how we would normally do it. Okay, so step 2 here is complete on our diagram. When a user clicks on the button, it calls the action creator, and the action creator contains a action with a type, and this right here says book, but really in our case a payload, where the payload is more information about the action that was just taken. So we've already done the wiring up for sending the action to all the reducers back in book list. That was the purpose of the bind action creators with the dispatch. So now we have a action that's getting piped into all of our different reducers. Let's continue the next section and update our reducer to make sure that this action is actually being used.